So in today's video, I want to show you a really simple and quick way of painting loose watercolor birds like this in Procreate. As usual, I'll list the brushes I'm using in the description. So as you can see, I've already got a sketch and a color palette placed in here, and you can have these for free in the description. I've just placed them in here as the top two layers, and then I set them both to multiply. And then to actually start painting, I want to make sure I'm on a blank layer down here below everything. And the first thing I need to do is sort of look at my reference image and kind of divide it up into these little sections. And I'm going to keep these in mind while I fill out all the main colors. So to do that, I'm going to change my brush to the medium quill. And I'm going to use this first color here. So I'll do a long press to grab it. And I'll use this to roughly block out all those sort of bluish gray areas. Now I'm doing this sort of in each section, kind of one by one. So that means there's going to be a little bit of overlap and sometimes a little bit of a gap. But that's fine because I think it adds to this sort of loose watercolor effect. And it's optional, but you can also shift the color, maybe a little bit darker, and use that in a few areas as well, just to make everything have a little bit more variation in it. After that, I'll use the beige tone and the yellow tone to block out the rest of the colors. And just for now, I'm going to ignore the details like the beak, the eyes, and the feet. And once the colors are kind of roughed out like this, we can do some blending. And I think it's easier for that if I just sort of turn off the sketch for now. And for the blending, I'm going to switch my brush to the background water blender. And I'm going to use this sort of in two different ways. So first, I'm going to use it very, very lightly. I'm almost just resting the pencil on the screen, like that's how light it is. And I'm just going to blend it all throughout this and try to combine some of these overlapping edges, but I'll try to leave a lot behind. And then also in areas where I need the contrast, like especially along the wing, I'm going to avoid blending that entirely. And then the second way of blending is kind of the same thing, but I'm just going to press a little bit harder. And I'm going to do this much more sparingly because when I press harder, it's going to create some interesting kind of patterns in the blending. And this is a nice effect, but I don't want to overdo it. After that, we need to do a little bit of shading. And basically, I want to define the edge of the wing a little bit more. So for that, I'm going to switch my color back to this blue tone, and then I'll adjust it so it's a bit darker. Then I'll change my brush to the Shoto brush, just because it has a nice rough edge, and I'm going to use this just to define this edge a little bit more. Then after that, I'll switch back to the water blender, and I'm just going to blend some of the edges here. So in the case of the wing, I'm just going to blend the inside edge. And then up here, I'll just kind of blend them all the way around just to make it softer. And it's optional, but you could also paint on pure white and blend it as well. That's just to add highlights, but I think in this case, it's not necessary. Next, I want to add some kind of water stain texture. And this is hard to explain, but I think you'll understand when you see it. Basically, I'll just make a blank layer above my bird, and I'll set this one to multiply. For the brush, I'm going to switch to the water stain glazing brush. And it's still set to that sort of dark blue tone, and I think this will work fine. I'm just going to use this to add some interesting areas of texture kind of on the head and the wings. And then up here where I kind of blended the head and it kind of fades away into the white, I'm actually going to use it to just kind of redefine that boundary. Then I'm going to switch back to the water blender, and I'm going to use it to soften this area as well. But also, I'm just going to randomly go over the rest of these kind of water stains and just blend certain edges of them. And then after that, I'm going to do a similar trick in this area, but obviously I can't use the same blue tone or it'll look weird on this color. So I'll just do my best to grab that color. Same water stain brush though. And I'll just try to define the edge here a little bit more. And so I really only need the outer edge of that just to get a little bit darker, but this inside edge should be smoother. So I'll just smooth that out with the water blender. And at this point, with the overall colors and textures finished, we can move on and start adding some details. So first, I'll kind of merge my water stain together with the bird layer, and then I'll do my details on separate layers above. I'll turn the sketch back on to make it easier, and I think I'll start with the beak. So for the beak, I'm going to grab this color here at the end. And then for the brush, I'll use the medium quill again, just add a little bit of a smaller size. And it's going to be kind of stroke based. So I'm just going to start with a light pressure here at the tip, and I'll just kind of fill out the top half. Then at this point, I can just taper it off again. And I'll do the same thing for the lower beak. And then to make the lower beak a bit darker, I'll go over it again. After that, I'll make the eye. So I'll make another layer, and I'll use a very dark color, almost black, and I'll just fill it out like this. So I'm using quite a bit of pressure at this point, and then as I sort of spiral into the center, I'm going to lighten it up. And that just naturally gives it a sort of darker area there. Now for the sake of contrast, I think it's nice if there's a little bit of a white border just kind of outside of it. So to do that, I'll actually just duplicate the eye. I'll select the lower one here, the original, and I'll raise the brightness to max. And this basically makes it pure white. So here's the black eye and here's the white eye. Then I can just use the arrow tool here to kind of stretch out the white eye, just to make it a little bit bigger. And you can barely see it here, but I think it's partly because the sketch is kind of distracting. So I'll turn that off. So you can see this little white edge there. Now to make that more stronger, I'm just going to duplicate the white eye a couple of times. I think 3 is enough. You can see that's a little bit stronger now. And then I'll just merge all the eye stuff together back onto one layer. And if you want, you can use pure white to add a highlight into the eye. And for the brush, I recommend using the annoying pen. And I'll just do a couple of kind of random details like this. And these details both look pretty good, but I think they're a little bit kind of rough and crooked. So to fix them, I recommend going to the liquify tool, set to push, and you can control the size like this. So for the eye, I'm going to try to sort of mold it kind of like clay and just make it a little bit rounder and smoother. There we go. Then since the beak is on a separate layer, I need to do it separately, and I'll just repeat the process on the beak. And there we go, that looks a lot better. Now I want to show you 2 more sort of optional things to improve the face. The first thing is, I want to blend where the beak sort of meets the bird. So just make sure the beak layer is selected. Then I'll grab the water blender, and I'll use it at a small size just to blend a couple areas. After that, I want to add some shading around the eye. So to do that, I'm going to make sure the original kind of bird layer is selected. Then I'll grab the water blender, and again, I'll use it at a small size, and I'm going to try to pull maybe a darker shade around the top of the eye like this. I just want to make kind of half the area above the eye a little bit darker than the bottom half. And then around the bottom, I'll do my best to pull in a lighter shade. Now in this case, it can't really get much lighter than that, but I think this will work fine. And also, it's up to you, but I think this eye is a little bit too big, so I'm just going to shrink it down and sort of refine the position. Next, I'll move on and do the feet, and these will be on their own layer, and I'm just going to fill them in using that original blue color and the medium quill brush. If you want, you can shade the bottoms with a little bit of a darker version of that color. And then lastly, I'll smooth out some of those shadows with the water blender, just set to a really small size. And then I'll also blend a little bit where the legs meet the body of the bird. And I think these legs look pretty much good enough. I think it's important not to add too much detail into those because they can sort of become the focal point. Now the color here is bothering me a little bit, so I'm just going to experiment with the hue, saturation, and brightness and see if I can find a more interesting tone for these legs. And at this point, the bird is pretty much finished. We just have to do a little bit of cleanup and refinement. So for that, I'm going to make sure all the layers for the bird are merged together onto one. And I'm going to start by sort of boosting the contrast and the colors. So I'll go to my adjustments, I'll go to curves, I'll make sure it's set to gamma, and I'm just going to tap to add a little blue node in those positions. And I'll start by lowering this one just a tiny bit, and then raising this one. And it's just going to boost the colors and make it more interesting. After that, I want to fix the edges here. Now, since we painted this so loosely, we ended up going way beyond the sketch. And if I just cut this back to match the sketch, we're going to lose all this interesting sort of edge texture. So there's kind of a trick I want to show you to fix that. So first, I'll turn the sketch back on, and I'll make sure my bird is selected. Then I'll go to liquify, I'll set it to push, you can copy my settings, and I'm just going to push all the overlapping edges back in line with the sketch. After that, I'll turn the sketch off again, and I'll just go in there with the eraser brush and erase back any of the areas that I couldn't fix by warping. And just like that, this simple watercolor bird is finished. As you can see, I think the final print turned out really nice, and I made this using the cheap Canon Pixma I mentioned last time. There's just something about handling your artwork and then seeing it on paper that's really inspiring to me, and I recommend all Procreate artists print their artwork as much as you can. As always, if you think I've earned it, please give this video a like. If you made it to the end, let me know in the comments. And here are 2 more watercolor tutorials I think you'll love to watch next.